fellow homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. I am making a pumpkin pudding, which is essentially the filling from pumpkin pie, but I'm not going to make it into pie. I'm going to make it into individual servings, and it's not going to have a crust. So this is a nice way to do portion control, and it's also a nice way to reduce the calories a bit in what you would normally do if you're having pumpkin pie, because a lot of those calories are in the crust. And it's a way to have a quick sweet fall and winter treat without all of the work that goes into making a crust. And so we do this quite a bit. I freeze pumpkin in 1 pound freezer bags, and then we make this for probably 3 or 4 months out of the year. So in this blender, I have 1 pound of homemade pumpkin. Actually, in this case, it's not actually pumpkin. It is a mix of delicata and butternut squash. I had a bunch of smaller sized delicata and butternut, and I was making some ravioli filling with it, and I had a little over 1 pound left over, and so I decided that I would make this with that. You can make pie with any type of winter squash. It does not have to be designated as pumpkin. You can do whatever you like. So I've got that. I've got a can of evaporated milk. I prefer to use evaporated milk in this instead of sweetened condensed milk, because then I can control the sugar. You can play around with the sugar here. You could use less than what the recipe calls for. You can use a blend of like sugar and stevia. You can just trade out the type of sugar that's in there and try something like coconut sugar or maple syrup. So there's lots of different things you can do. I'm going to stick to the basic recipe here today. This is essentially the recipe for Libby's pumpkin pie that's on the back of the Libby's can, except it's made with homegrown ingredients. I am going to back off on the sugar a little bit. It normally calls for 3/4 of a cup. I'm going to use 2/3, so I'm just reducing it just slightly. You could also use brown sugar in this instead of white sugar, which gives it a nice caramely flavor. So that's another option. I have done a million variations on this. So 1 pound of pumpkin, 2 eggs, a can of evaporated milk, 2/3 to 3/4 of a cup of sugar. And then I have made this recipe so many times that I literally have it memorized from the back of the Libby's can. It is a teaspoon of cinnamon, a 1/2 teaspoon of both ginger and salt, 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves, and that's all that the Libby's recipe calls for. You could easily just substitute a couple teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice instead of doing individual spices if you had that on hand and wanted to use that. Or you can just play around with the different spices, whatever you like. A lot of pumpkin pie spice often has nutmeg in it. This particular recipe does not, but that's really common as well. And then I like to do 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground allspice. So just a little bit of allspice in there. So we're gonna blend this up. Excuse the mess. We've been in the process of repainting our kitchen behind and up above the cabinets and things. When we first bought this house, we weren't sure if we were going to completely redo the kitchen, and so it was the one part of the house we didn't paint. And then we never got around to actually painting it. And then because I'm doing videos now, I've noticed how truly terrible it looked, and so we decided to paint the kitchen this weekend. I really like to make this in a blender because I'm using homegrown squash and it's often got a little bit of chunkiness to it. And so by throwing it into the blender, it's very easy to make it come out very creamy without having to fuss. So this is a very, very quick recipe. So that's our filling. I'm going to give these little ramekins a quick spray. And if you wanted to do a bit of a crust, you could put something like almond flour in the bottom of these, or graham cracker crust. There's lots of things you could do. We've been eating plenty of rich things, including many, many Christmas cookies of late, and so I'm just gonna skip that. And typically when we make a pumpkin pie, it gets divided up into 8 servings. And so I try to divide this up into 8 servings. And so I'm gonna start by filling these about halfway up and then see how much filling I have left. It's funny, there have been several times in my 25-year marriage where I have made this, some version of pumpkin pie, and completely forgot to add the sugar to the recipe. So yeah, we've had pumpkin pie on more than one occasion where it's been without any sugar at all. I don't recommend that. It's not very tasty. But sometimes you get a little ahead of yourself and kind of forget what you've done and what you haven't done. The other nice thing about these is they cook a little bit faster than they would if you were doing a full-sized pie. And so whereas a full-size pie takes over an hour typically to cook, this will cook in about half of that time because you're getting a much smaller mass that you're trying to heat and a lot more airflow around it. So into the oven these go, 375 for about 30 minutes. So it's been 30 minutes. Let's take a look at our pudding, or custard as the case may be. You can see they puffed up a lot. That's just rise from the steam. Yeah, those look good. You don't want them to be obviously soft in the middle, but you want them to still have a little bit of jiggle. And you can see there's still a little bit of jiggle there. These are gonna kind of continue to set as they cool. And so I think we're done. We'll let those cool and we'll come back and that'll be dessert for tonight's Christmas dinner. Yay. Here is our pumpkin pudding after it's been cooling for probably an hour or so. And you can see they sink. That's typical. Things sink back down once they've cooled off. But that should be a lovely, lovely custard. And my husband and I are gonna eat a couple of these for dessert tonight. And that's all there is to it. So really quick and easy dessert and a whole lot less calories without the crust, even though the crust is delightful and we all love it. So if you want to just do quick, simple squash puddings that are pretty healthy because of the squash that are in it, this is a great way to go. Thanks for watching, Tribe. If you have any questions, drop me a comment. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe. I have new content coming out every week.